For us, it was definitely angel investment. When Anansi was bought by Scott Griffin, and he's invested a considerable amount of money. So there's no question you need money to do it.
Tara, I think you sort of inferred it when you gave your example of how Maple sort of got going, of initially getting funding and then finding that sustainability.
Yeah,
was
we
there
never really had a project-to-project stage at Maple. It was very much Grant had a background in technology. He was a programmer himself, and he had worked with a big Bay Street consultancy doing technology implementations. And so he didn't come through the music industry from the bottom. He came from technology into music. And so for him, he had a very strong business background. He really came in with a plan. The first part of the business was an e-commerce site, which is still running today, maplemusic.com. We would now work with over 800 Canadian artists running online stores for them. We do fulfillment, customer service, everything. When Grant started that, he started it as a lost leader to build relationships because he knew he was new to the industry. He knew it was a very small group. All of our key clients, the first store we built was for the Cowboy Junkies, still a client. Second store is Tragically Hip, still a client. So he really used that to build those relationships. And then he took that base of relationships to start a record label. And that was always part of the plan. And then he took the success of the record label and started a distribution company. And then in November, we acquired a ticketing company. And there's a long-term plan for the business to become a full-service entertainment company that isn't limited to music. And I think the reason he's been successful is he's been able to adjust his vision, but to stick with it. He hasn't abandoned his vision. He said, okay, industry's changed radically, adjust here, let's think of a different way to get to the next stage in the game. But we never really had that project to project
Ian,
mentality.
was there ever a time when Exclaim had some...
I would probably say it was pretty early on in our existence as a magazine that we started doing concerts. And when we first put them on, it was funny because it was as fundraisers. This is like '92, and we were just launching, and all these bands would want to support us to keep us going. So bands would play for free, and it would be a fundraiser. And then these events started becoming thank you events for us to put on an event for advertisers that had supported us, our writers, and then our clientele, the people who were advertising through Exclaim, said, that's our audience, because these were all events that weren't private events. They were open to the public, and anybody could buy tickets and come to these events. And we realized we've got a great relationship where we've got bands that we want to support. We've got a relationship with Toyota. Mm-hmm. Why don't we take some of that Toyota money and say, wouldn't it make sense, Toyota, to reach the audience directly in this live event? And that was very early on in our career, where we ended up with this whole events part of the company that just happened naturally from being part of the music industry. And the expression "writing about music is like tap dancing about architecture" was relevant when we just said, if we're trying to get music in front of people that we think is great for bands people haven't heard of yet, the band should perform and play in front of people. And that became a marketing opportunity, for a lot of the clients that we worked with. And that, was a very early, success that we had, and became just another part of our organization, which has continued to grow, year to year.
One thing I think it would be amazing for you to talk about is how you managed to transition so gracefully into corporate sponsorship. Because when Exclaim started, you were very much an alternative publication. The name itself was kind of a nod to a certain aesthetic, certain language that perhaps was not appropriate.
I've been good, though. I've been good. I think twice. For the record, Jill did bring a really raunchy video that we weren't able to play for technical reasons. So.
But yeah, and then, over time as those tours grew, you had a car company sponsor tour, you've had liquor company sponsor tours, and it from my position within the industry, it hasn't seemed to erode your brand. If anything, it's grown it and strengthened it, and that's pretty magical in a cultural
industry. It's
industry.
something we were very conscious of, and again, this is like early 90s. We were just starting, and I remember when we ran our first Molson's ad in the paper, and I just thought, oh my God, what are people going to think? Like, this is, and nobody said anything. And then you just realize that that mass marketing is meant to be ubiquitous, right? It's just, it's supposed to be everywhere, and it was just a decision that we made that we're going to take those, marketing dollars because they don't negatively, affect the brand, the Exclaim brand, and we evolved into that. With respect to bands and working with bands, when we first started doing these concert tours that were sponsored by big corporate entities. I mean, essentially, we've worked with just about all the car companies and different alcohol brands, etc. A lot of bands say no. Like, we approach them and it's like, here's the scenario. This is the exposure you're going to get. These are the the dollars that you might get out of the scenario. And we always respected that answer. They said, here's what we're doing. Put it on the table. And what's interesting over the years, and I mean, you can respond to this with relation to the music industry, but more bands started saying yes.
Now, John, I'm curious in terms of the same context of Polar Mobile, which I suspect may have had a different velocity given the dynamism of that market. Was there a similar sort of catalytic event or a turning point in which you stopped being, just guys trying to figure it out, to being a real?
Yeah, it was the first 2 customers. That's what it was, and it was 3 years ago the first line of code was written in our platform. Somehow the company managed to get McLean's in Business Week. It was the first 2 customers. I think then they looked at each other and said, "We're officially a company." That's what just happened, and then that's when the funding came in. After that, and I know that's a big piece. And so once we got those brands on, then there really wasn't that project to project. It's full on from here. We have these 2 reputable brands. Let's make something of it. It's ours to lose at this point in time.
And I would certainly infer from the a few questions or reactions that we've gotten from the crowd that you've been very persuasive. So perhaps if you guys have any questions for the crowd that you would like answered, either done as Trina McQueen did earlier in terms of a show of hands, or just finding individuals that you want to sort of put on the spot and ask
an example.
Individual in the blue
He
shirt.
does not record at home.
Hi, Michael Murray, Ontario Arts Council. So I hear about 700 independent artists apply each year, and for sure, at least half of them are on a laptop. And I think the big difference I'm seeing, and seeing Ian, this struck me, is hustle. Is that when I was an independent artist a long time ago, I called Exclaim for a review. And Ian, I think you or your business, someone high up, answered the phone.
It's probably me.
Yeah, and this struck me. Here's a guy who started a company who answered the phone when an independent artist called. I don't know, and maybe across the board, how many hours do you guys work? I think that's the equation we're missing. And the artists that are eventually successful, you see them everywhere. They never give up. How many hours do you work? How much do you feel you're working more hours than other people in your sector? And I think that's what makes you a leader. Sometimes, obviously, there's inspiration, but there's perspiration, there's hustle. So
now, as you guys answer that quickly, there was someone behind you who had a question. If you could pass the mic so we can get as many questions in. So briefly, in a day, an average day, how many hours do you work?
It's easy. It would be easier to answer how many hours I don't work. So I can usually squeeze in about 7 hours of sleep. So what's 24 minus 7? Yeah, that would be it. But to that point, and back to us, a lot of people here starting our own company. I mean, the only way you can work that many hours is when you're doing something that you love, that you're passionate about. And if it's just a job, at the end of the day, there is no way, that you're going to do that. And that's even for people that come and work at our office. That's the main thing we're looking for. Is that passion.
Well, when I'm online with a story and interacting with an audience, that's a 24-hour-a-day job, and that's reaching a global audience. I mean, it's you don't
Somebody's
even you
awake
don't yeah you,
somewhere all the
someone's
time.
yeah someone's always awake, and you don't need an export grant to reach them.
John?
Well, when you're building